The Galactic Council station orbited a dying star, its once gleaming corridors now filled with panic and desperation. The station housed representatives from over 200 peaceful species, but today only one crisis mattered. The Etherians were dying and they were begging for help. Elder Zinther stood in the observation chamber, his form flickering between visible and invisible as his telepathic distress grew stronger. The Etherians were beings of pure grace and intellect, evolved on a world of soft light and flowing water. They had never built weapons. They had never known war. Their entire civilization was built on the idea that all conflicts could be solved through understanding and compromise. Now that belief was being tested to its breaking point. The Korthians had arrived 3 days ago without warning. They were brutal, efficient, and completely indifferent to suffering. Their ships descended on the Etherian homeworld like metal locusts, burning cities and crushing the gentle resistance that the Etherians tried to mount. In 72 hours, the most advanced peaceful civilization in known space had been reduced to scattered survivors, hiding in underground bunkers and orbital shelters. Zinther's telepathic plea had been sent across the entire galaxy, a desperate call for mercy from any species who might hear it. Most ignored it. Some listened but offered only sympathy, unable to help. The Etherians had no military allies, no friends with teeth and claws willing to fight for them. They were alone. On the other side of the galaxy, Captain Marcus Hayes sat in the command chair of the UNSC Discovery, a small diplomatic vessel crewed by only 45 people. Marcus was a man of principle and action. His dark hair was streaked with gray, and his brown eyes had seen enough of the galaxy to know that peaceful solutions were always better than violent ones. That belief had kept him alive for 30 years of space exploration. His crew was small but capable. Sarah Mitchell, the ship's linguistics officer, was a brilliant woman in her early 40s who could read and speak in over 30 different languages. Her quick mind and calm demeanor made her invaluable in tense situations. Kevin Davis served as tactical officer, a younger man with sharp military instincts who had grown up on a colony world. He understood that sometimes diplomacy needed backup plans. Lisa Brown was the medical officer, a woman who believed that healing was as important as fighting. When the Etherian distress call came through, it was Sarah who decoded it first. Her face went pale as she listened to the urgent flowing language of the Etherians. She immediately brought it to Marcus's attention. The captain listened to the plea, hearing the fear and desperation in every word, and made his decision instantly. They would change course and investigate. The journey to the Etherian system took 6 days. During that time, Marcus reviewed everything they knew about the Etherians. They were one of the oldest civilizations in known space with technology that surpassed most younger species. But they had never weaponized their knowledge. Instead, they focused on art, science, and philosophy. They had become wealthy through trade and knowledge sharing, respected throughout the galaxy for their peaceful nature. The Korthians, by contrast, were relative newcomers to galactic affairs. They came from a harsh world where survival required aggression and conquest. They had appeared suddenly about 15 years ago, and their military had been expanding ever since. Most species stayed out of their way, hoping that their expansionist phase would eventually end. As the Discovery entered the Etherian system, Marcus and his crew saw the devastation immediately. The Etherian homeworld, once described as a jewel of the galaxy, was burning. Entire continents were obscured by smoke and ash. Orbital stations had been destroyed or captured. The few Etherian defense ships that remained were damaged and limping away. Sarah established contact with the Etherian survivors in orbit. When her face appeared on the main view screen, Marcus saw the holographic form of Elder Zinther. The Etherian's body flickered with weak energy, a sign of his exhaustion and despair. In a voice that seemed to echo in their minds, Zinther greeted Marcus with gratitude and desperate hope. "You came," Zinther said, his words translated by Sarah's equipment. "We felt the strength of your ship, the determination in your approach. Humans, we have heard of your kind. You are young but fierce. You survive on difficult worlds. Perhaps you might help us." Marcus felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. He was a diplomat first, but he was also a military captain. He understood what the Etherians were facing, and he understood that they had almost no chance against the Korthians without help. "Elder Zinther, we will do everything we can to assist you," Marcus said carefully. "Tell me your situation. How many Korthian ships do they have? What are your remaining forces?" The Etherian elder explained that the Korthian force consisted of 23 warships and countless smaller attack craft. The Etherians had lost most of their defenders. Their population had been reduced dramatically in just a few days of bombardment. The Korthian commander, a general named Vaxor, had transmitted a message demanding unconditional surrender. If the Etherians refused, the Korthians would begin orbital bombardment of the civilian population centers. Marcus listened to the grim details and felt his jaw tighten. This was not a situation that diplomacy could solve alone. The Korthians were not interested in negotiation. They wanted conquest and domination. But Marcus was a man who believed in trying everything before accepting defeat. "I want to attempt contact with the Korthian commander," Marcus said to his crew. "Perhaps we can arrange a negotiation. Sarah, prepare a message for transmission to General Vaxor. I want to request a meeting. Tell him that Earth Command would like to discuss the situation peacefully before any further action is taken." Kevin Davis looked skeptical. "Captain, the Korthians don't negotiate. That's not their way." "Not unless they see advantage in it," Marcus replied. "Right now they don't know who we are. They might be curious enough to talk. We have to try." Sarah sent the message and the waiting began. The Discovery held position outside the main zone of Korthian activity, monitoring the situation while hoping for a response. The devastation below continued. Small Korthian shuttles moved across the landscape, attacking remaining points of resistance. The Etherians in orbit watched helplessly. After 2 hours, a response came. The Korthians agreed to meet with the human captain. Vaxor would receive Marcus at the main Korthian command post on the Etherian surface. It was a small victory, but it was something. Marcus prepared himself for one of the most important negotiations of his career. He had no idea that this meeting would change everything. As Marcus prepared to descend to the surface, he told his crew to watch carefully and be ready for anything. Kevin promised to keep the ship's weapons online, and Sarah reminded Marcus to be careful. Lisa simply squeezed his shoulder, offering silent support. Marcus took a deep breath, stepped into the shuttle, and descended toward an uncertain future. The sky above the Etherian homeworld was filled with smoke and ash. It fell like gray snow as Marcus's shuttle touched down near the Korthian command center. Everything was about to change, though he did not yet know it. The command center of the Korthian forces was nothing like any military installation Marcus had ever seen. It was designed for efficiency and intimidation in equal measure. The walls were made of thick metal, reinforced with technology that Marcus did not fully understand. Soldiers in dark armor moved through the corridors with mechanical precision. Everything about the place was cold and harsh and utterly devoid of mercy. General Vaxor was waiting in the central chamber. He was a massive creature, standing nearly 8 feet tall with scales that gleamed like polished steel. His body was muscular and built for combat. His eyes were sharp and intelligent, but they held no kindness. His face bore scars from past battles, marks of honor in Korthian culture. When he saw Marcus, a smile crossed his face, but it was not a smile of welcome. It was the smile of a predator looking at prey. "Captain Hayes," Vaxor said, his deep voice echoing through the chamber. "We have heard of the human vessel in orbit. I must say I am disappointed. We expected a larger force, perhaps something more threatening. Instead, we get a single small ship and a captain foolish enough to walk into the heart of my command center." Marcus kept his posture straight and his face calm. He had trained himself to show no fear, no matter how terrifying the situation. "General Vaxor, I have come to propose a peaceful solution to this situation. The Etherians are willing to negotiate with you. Perhaps we can find a way to resolve this matter without further bloodshed." Vaxor laughed. It was a harsh, cutting sound that seemed to fill the entire chamber. His officers standing nearby joined in, their laughter a chorus of cruel amusement. When the general finally stopped, his expression turned cold and serious. "Peaceful solution?" Vaxor repeated, as if the words were strange and foreign. "Captain, you speak as if the Etherians have value, as if their survival matters. Let me explain something to you about my people. We do not negotiate with the weak. We do not compromise. We conquer, we expand. The Etherians have resources and territory that belong to the Korthian Empire now. This is not up for discussion." Marcus felt his stomach tighten, but he pressed forward. "General, I represent Earth Command. We have significant military resources, and we are prepared to support the Etherians in their defense. If you attack them further, you will be attacking human interests. That would be unwise." Vaxor stepped closer to Marcus. The captain had to resist the urge to step backward. The Korthian general towered over him. his scaled body radiating heat and power. When Vaxer spoke again, his voice was low and intense. "You represent Earth? This Earth is where your species comes from, yes? A young world, full of fragile creatures just learning to explore space. I know about humanity, Captain. We have studied your kind. You are adaptable, perhaps intelligent, but you are not warriors. You are not conquerors. You are soft beings from a soft world who play at diplomacy, while real powers carve out their rightful place in the galaxy." Marcus felt anger rising in his chest, but he kept his voice level. "You are making a mistake, General. Earth is not soft. We come from a world where survival is a constant struggle. We have learned to be strong, and we will not abandon our principles or our allies to any empire that seeks to destroy peaceful species." Vaxer circled Marcus slowly, like a hunter examining a potential threat. "Your principles," the general said thoughtfully. "A weakness, truly. When faced with real power, principles crumble. Let me make this simple for you, Captain. You will return to your ship. You will gather your crew and leave this system. You have exactly 1 solar cycle to comply. If your vessel is still here after that time, I will destroy it. It will be simple. My fleet can eliminate your little ship before you even have time to raise your shields." The general stopped directly in front of Marcus and placed one massive clawed hand on the captain's shoulder. The pressure was immense, and Marcus could feel the strength in that grip. One squeeze and his bones would break like glass. "I am giving you a gift, Captain. The gift of life. Take it and go," Vaxer said. "Attempt to resist and you will die. Your crew will die, and the Etherians will still fall to me. This is not a negotiation. This is an inevitability. You are simply choosing how you will face it." Vaxer released Marcus and stepped away. The captain forced himself to breathe slowly, controlling the anger that threatened to overwhelm him. He had come hoping to find reason and compromise. Instead, he had found nothing but stone and steel and absolute certainty of conquest. "I will convey your message to my command," Marcus said quietly. "But understand this, General. My world has faced far greater challenges than your conquest. We have survived as a species despite nature itself being our enemy. We did not survive by running, and we do not abandon those we have pledged to protect." Vaxer's expression did not change. He simply gestured toward the door, and his soldiers moved toward Marcus to escort him out. The captain turned and walked from the chamber, his mind already racing with calculations and possibilities. As he left, he could hear Vaxor's laughter following him, a sound of absolute confidence and supreme arrogance. The shuttle ride back to the Discovery felt like it took an eternity. Marcus sat in silence, staring out at the devastated landscape below. The Corthians were already moving forward with their conquest. More cities were burning. He could see the impact of orbital strikes even from the shuttle, massive explosions that lit up the darkening sky. When Marcus reached the bridge of the Discovery, his crew was waiting anxiously. Sarah immediately approached him, her face filled with concern. Kevin stood at the tactical station, his hands ready over the weapons controls. Lisa waited nearby, ready for her captain's orders. "It did not go well," Marcus said simply. "Vaxer will not negotiate. He has given us an ultimatum. We have 1 day to leave the system or be destroyed. He has made it clear that the Etherians have no value to him, and their extinction is not a matter of if, but when." Kevin's jaw tightened. "Captain, we need to call for backup. This situation is beyond what we can handle alone. Earth Command needs to know what we are facing." Marcus nodded. He had already come to the same conclusion. "You are right. Sarah, prepare a message for Earth Command. Tell them what we have found here. Tell them that the Etherians face complete annihilation, and that the Corthians are preparing for conquest. Include all tactical data we have gathered on the Corthian fleet and their military capabilities." Sarah immediately began working on the message, her fingers flying across her console. Marcus walked to the window and looked out at the burning world below. He thought of the millions of Etherians dying below, the ancient civilization being erased from existence. He thought of his promise to Elder Zinther, the hope he had given them. "The message is ready to transmit, Captain," Sarah said after several minutes. "However, it will take approximately 3 weeks for it to reach Earth Command through the relay stations. Even if they respond immediately, our nearest fleet is still weeks away." Marcus felt the weight of that truth settle on him. They were alone here with no backup, facing overwhelming odds, but they would not leave. They could not leave, not while people were dying. Not while there was still hope, however thin that hope might be. In the darkness of space above a dying world, Captain Marcus Hayes and his small crew waited for a response that seemed impossible to receive in time. But they did not know that change was already coming, that somewhere in the distant reaches of the galaxy, the Deathworlders were already stirring to action. The Discovery had been holding position in the Etherian system for 18 hours. Captain Marcus Hayes sat in the command chair, watching the tactical displays show the slow but steady destruction of the Etherian civilization. The Corthians were methodical in their assault. They had begun orbital bombardment of civilian centers, moving from city to city with mechanical precision. The Etherians had no defense left. Their orbital stations had fallen, their starfighters had been destroyed, and their people could only hide and wait for death. Marcus had sent multiple messages to his crew, warning them to prepare the ship for combat. He would not leave without attempting anything to stop this genocide. But he also knew that the Discovery was no match for the Corthian fleet. Even if they could destroy a few enemy ships, it would only delay the inevitable. Sarah sat at her communications station, monitoring all channels. She had established a weak connection with some of the surviving Etherians in underground shelters. Through that connection, she relayed updates to Marcus about the situation on the ground. Each update was worse than the last. Thousands were dying. Entire cities were becoming tombs of ash and rubble. Kevin Davis maintained constant watch over the tactical displays. His military training told him that they should flee. There was no honor in dying for a losing cause, but something in his human nature pushed him to stay. Maybe it was loyalty to Marcus. Maybe it was the knowledge that these people on the ground had done nothing to deserve this fate. Lisa Brown had prepared the medical bay as best she could. She knew that if battle came, there would be wounded. Human and possibly Etherian survivors would need treatment. She had stocked every available resource for emergency care. The hours crawled by with agonizing slowness. Marcus kept watching the clock, calculating how much time remained before the Corthian ultimatum expired. 18 hours became 20 hours. 20 hours became 22. The captain had stopped sleeping, his eyes fixed on the displays showing the destruction below. Then, at hour 23, something changed. Kevin suddenly sat up straight in his tactical chair. His eyes widened as he stared at his displays. "Captain, I am reading multiple ships entering the system. Large ships. Military configuration. They are dropping out of warp space on the far side of the system." Marcus felt his heart leap. "Corthian reinforcements?" "No, sir," Kevin said, his voice filled with disbelief. "The energy signatures do not match Corthian technology. The ships they are human. They are human warships," Sarah gasped. "That is impossible." Earth Command said the nearest fleet was weeks away. But there they were, 37 human warships moving through space in perfect formation. They were led by a massive flagship, easily twice the size of the Discovery. The ships had the distinctive design of human military vessels, sleek, aggressive, built for combat in ways that were both beautiful and terrifying. The human fleet moved into the system with purposeful speed. Their course was intercept, heading directly toward the Corthian positions. Within minutes, they had taken up position between the Corthians and the Etherian homeworld. It was a simple but powerful statement. "You will not advance further." A transmission burst across all frequencies. The voice was calm, controlled, and carried an edge of absolute authority. It was Admiral Jennifer Grant, commander of the Third Fleet. She had been transiting through a strategic wormhole when Earth Command's message had reached her. The wormhole had allowed her to arrive far sooner than anyone had calculated possible. "This is Admiral Jennifer Grant of the Third Human Fleet," the transmission began. "I am ordering all Corthian military forces to cease offensive operations immediately. You will withdraw from Etherian territory within 1 solar cycle. Failure to comply will result in military action. I am transmitting detailed tactical data to show you exactly what will happen if you attempt to engage my fleet." The transmission included a perfect breakdown of every Corthian ship, their defensive capabilities, their weak points. It showed exactly how human weapons would penetrate their shields. It showed firing patterns that would leave no escape route. It was not a threat made in anger or emotion. It was a simple statement of fact, delivered with complete confidence. On the bridge of the Discovery, Marcus and his crew watched in amazement as the situation transformed. The power balance had shifted completely. The Corthians, who had seemed absolutely dominant just hours before, now found themselves facing a superior force. The human fleet did not look powerful in the way that Korthian ships looked powerful. The human vessels were not covered in weapons ports or aggressive armor. But there was something in their design, something in the way they moved that suggested absolute capability. General Vaxer responded to Admiral Grant's ultimatum with predictable arrogance. He sent a message to the human fleet, claiming that the Korthians had faced far greater challenges. He declared that humanity was interfering in Korthian destiny, and that this interference would be answered with destruction. He ordered his fleet to prepare for combat. It seemed that Vaxor did not understand what he was facing. The Korthians had experience fighting other species that relied on numbers or firepower. They had experience with civilizations that had advanced technology, but lacked the will to use it effectively. They had no experience fighting a species that came from a death world, that had been shaped by an environment that constantly tested them, that had learned to survive through adaptation and absolute determination. The battle began with a human transmission. All Korthian vessels have 10 minutes to begin retreat maneuvers. Those who do not will be engaged. The Korthians did not retreat. Instead, they moved forward, their ships accelerating toward the human fleet. It was a fatal mistake. The moment the Korthian ships crossed into human weapons range, the battle became one-sided. The human fleet responded with coordinated attacks that showed years of training and discipline. Weapons fire tore through Korthian shields with devastating accuracy. Human ships moved with precision, using the Etherian system's gravity wells and asteroid fields to their advantage. The Korthian vessels, larger and more heavily armed but less maneuverable, found themselves unable to track or target the human fighters. Within 5 minutes, the first Korthian ship exploded, torn apart by concentrated fire from 3 human destroyers. Within 10 minutes, another Korthian vessel was limping away with critical damage. The Korthian fleet, which had seemed so invincible to the Etherians, was being systematically dismantled. Aboard the flagship, Admiral Grant watched the tactical displays with cold precision. Her crews operated their weapon systems with mechanical efficiency. This was not revenge or hatred. This was simply the application of superior force by an opponent who had been trained since childhood to understand combat and survival. General Vaxer realized his mistake too late. He tried to order a retreat, but by then the damage was severe. Nearly a third of his fleet had been destroyed or disabled. The remaining Korthian ships turned and ran, accelerating away from the system at maximum speed. They left behind wrecked vessels and scattered debris. Admiral Grant did not pursue. The human fleet simply held position, maintaining perfect formation between the Korthians and the Etherian homeworld. The message was clear. Anyone who attempts to harm the Etherians again will face the same fate. On the bridge of the Discovery, Captain Marcus Hayes felt tears of relief streaming down his face. Sarah was cheering, Kevin was smiling, and Lisa was laughing. The impossible had happened. The Deathworlders had arrived, and they had changed everything. Below, on the Etherian homeworld, Elder Zinther emerged from the underground shelters and looked up at the sky. The bombardment had stopped. The fires were cooling, and above them the humans now stood watch. The Etherians had prayed for mercy from the galaxy. Instead, they had received something far more valuable. They had received protection from those strong enough to provide it, and moral enough to use that strength wisely. The Etherian homeworld was healing slowly. The fires that had raged across the continents for days were now extinguished. The smoke that had blocked out the sun was beginning to clear. Reconstruction had started in the cities that could still be saved. And everywhere, there was a sense of gratitude mixed with wonder at the arrival of the humans. 3 days after the battle, Elder Zinther requested a formal meeting with Admiral Jennifer Grant and Captain Marcus Hayes. The location chosen was a restored temple near the Etherian capital, a place of peace and philosophy where important decisions had been made for thousands of years. The Great Hall had been damaged by the Korthian bombardment, but the Etherians had worked quickly to repair it for this historic meeting. Admiral Grant arrived with a small honor guard. She was a woman in her 50s, with sharp features and alert eyes that showed she missed nothing. Her uniform was crisp and clean, though it bore scars from combat. She carried herself with the confidence of someone who had spent decades in command, making difficult decisions and living with the consequences. Behind her came Marcus, who felt a strange sense of reunion with the Etherian elder. Xanther greeted them in the Great Hall. The ancient Etherian was surrounded by other leaders of Etherian society, scholars, artists, philosophers, and government officials. All of them watched the humans with a mixture of fear and fascination. These beings from a harsh world had saved them, but what did that mean for the future? What did it mean to owe your existence to another species? Xanther stepped forward and extended a hand toward Admiral Grant. The Etherian's form shimmered as he moved, his body still weak from the emotional trauma of the invasion. In Etherian tradition, the extended hand was a gesture of complete trust and openness. Grant took the hand gently, careful not to squeeze too hard. Through a translator device, Xanther began to speak. His voice carried the weight of someone who had nearly lost everything. Admiral Grant, Captain Hayes, the Etherian people owe you a debt that can never be repaid. You came to us when all hope was lost. You fought for us with a ferocity and skill that we have never witnessed before. You are the reason that my people still exist. Admiral Grant nodded respectfully. Elder Xanther, humanity does not act out of a desire for debt or obligation. We acted because it was right. We acted because we believe that intelligent beings have a responsibility to protect those who cannot protect themselves. This is a principle that we hold sacred. One of the Etherian scholars, a younger being named Velon, stepped forward. His form was more solid than Xanther's, his colors brighter. But I do not understand, Velon said, confusion evident in his telepathic transmission. The histories teach us that younger species are typically aggressive and self-serving. We expected to find such qualities in humans. Instead, we find something unexpected. You are powerful, yes, but you do not seek to dominate us with that power. Why? Marcus smiled at the question. He had been thinking about this himself during the long journey back to the Etherian system. Because power without principle is just tyranny, he said simply. My people come from a world where nature itself is hostile. Our planet is full of predators, earthquakes, storms, and disease. We did not become strong by being cruel to each other. We became strong because we learned to work together, to protect the weak among us, and to stand against threats that would destroy us all. Sarah Mitchell, who had accompanied Marcus to the meeting, added her own thoughts. On Earth, the strongest humans are often the most compassionate. We have learned that a community that protects its vulnerable members is stronger than a community built on domination. This is why humans fight for justice. This is why we cannot ignore genocide, even when it happens on other worlds. The Etherians listened carefully to these words. Xanther closed his eyes and seemed to be meditating on what the humans had said. When he opened them again, his form seemed to shine more brightly. The other Etherians felt the shift in his emotions through their telepathic connection, and they seemed to relax slightly. Your people are remarkable, Xanther said finally. I have touched your minds briefly, Admiral Grant, and I felt something unusual there. You carry the weight of command, the responsibility for many lives. But beneath that weight, I sensed something else. I sensed compassion. Real compassion, not programmed empathy or evolutionary instinct. You have made a choice to care about beings that are not your own. This choice defines your species more than any military power ever could. Admiral Grant listened to these words, and for a moment, her stern military demeanor softened. Thank you, Elder. That is perhaps the greatest compliment I have ever received. Kevin Davis and Lisa Brown, who had also been invited to the meeting, stood nearby. Kevin found himself fascinated by the Etherians. They were so different from humans, so delicate and graceful, and yet they had survived attempted genocide. They had the will to live, just like any human. Lisa felt the healer's instinct rise in her. She wanted to help the Etherians recover from their trauma, to restore them to their former beauty. Over the next several hours, the meeting evolved into something more than a formal diplomatic gathering. It became an exchange of ideas and understanding. The Etherians asked questions about Earth, about human history, about what drove humanity to explore the stars. The humans answered openly, explaining the struggles and triumphs that had shaped their civilization. Admiral Grant explained that humans had also faced invasions and genocidal wars in their past. We have learned through bitter experience that the only way to prevent such horrors is to stand together against them, she said. We may be young, as a spacefaring species, but we are not naive about the dangers of the galaxy. We understand that there are those who will take what they want through force if they believe they can succeed. So we ensure that they cannot succeed. This is why we maintain strong militaries, not to conquer, but to defend. Sarah showed the Etherians recordings of Earth. She showed them the jungles, the oceans, the mountains. She showed them cities filled with millions of humans living together. She showed them the diversity of human culture, the different ways that humans expressed creativity and built meaning in their lives. The Etherians were moved by these images, seeing in humanity a reflection of their own deep connection to culture and knowledge. Toward the end of the meeting, Zinther made a formal announcement. The Etherian Collective wishes to propose an alliance with the human species. We offer our friendship, our knowledge, and our resources. In exchange, we ask only that humanity continue to stand against those who would prey on the innocent. We ask that humanity be willing to be the sword of justice in a galaxy that often shows little mercy. Admiral Grant accepted the proposal formally. Earth will be honored to stand with the Etherians. We pledge our protection and our friendship. This alliance will endure. As the meeting concluded, Marcus and Zinther walked together through the temple gardens. The Etherian elder pointed out the damage that had been inflicted on the ancient plants and structures. But already, new growth was beginning. Life was returning, slowly but surely. Your species has a future, Marcus said to Zinther. A better future, with humanity as an ally. The Korthians will not return here. They have learned that there are forces in the galaxy that they cannot overcome. Zinther nodded, his form shimmering with emotion. Yes, we have learned something as well, Captain. We have learned that mercy is not the absence of power. True mercy comes from those who have the power to destroy but choose instead to protect. Your people understand this in a way that many civilizations never will. This is why we will remember you, long after this day has faded into history. Above the Etherian homeworld, the human fleet maintained its watch. Down below, the work of healing and reconstruction continued. A new era was beginning, one where the Deathworlders had shown that their strength could be used for something greater than conquest. They had shown that humanity could be a force for good in a galaxy, desperately in need of protection and hope. 2 weeks had passed since the human fleet arrived at the Etherian system. The reconstruction efforts were proceeding well. Human engineers worked alongside Etherian scientists to repair the damaged infrastructure. Medical teams treated the wounded. Food and supplies were distributed to those who had lost everything. The human presence on the Etherian homeworld had become a symbol of hope and protection. But the impact of humanity's actions was spreading far beyond the Etherian system. News traveled quickly through the galaxy, carried by merchant ships and diplomatic channels. The story was simple but powerful. A young species from a harsh world had defeated a conquering empire and saved an entire civilization. The Korthians, once feared as unstoppable, had been driven away by humans in a military engagement that lasted less than an hour. The galaxy was paying attention, and many species were becoming very interested in friendship with humanity. Admiral Jennifer Grant stood on the Etherian surface, looking out at the restored city. The buildings that had been destroyed were being rebuilt. The Etherians worked with purpose and determination. They had come back from the brink of extinction, and that knowledge gave them strength. Her communication officer approached with an urgent message. Admiral, we are receiving diplomatic requests from 43 different species. They all want to establish negotiations with Earth. Most of them are expressing interest in protective alliances. Grant read through the list of species. Some were familiar, civilizations that Earth had encountered before. Others were completely new, species that humanity had never made contact with previously. And yet all of them had one thing in common. They wanted to be protected by the Deathworlders. Inform Earth Command of the situation, Grant ordered. And tell Captain Hayes that I want to hold a diplomatic summit. Let us gather the leaders of these species. It is time that humanity's role in the galaxy became officially established. 3 days later, the main shuttle bay of the UNCS Valiant had been converted into a grand conference chamber. Representatives from 35 different species had gathered. Some floated in special environmental chambers. Others stood on adapted platforms. Some were humanoid, while others were so alien that their very existence seemed impossible. But they had all come for one reason: to speak with the humans. Captain Marcus Hayes stood at the center of the chamber. He was nervous, more nervous than he had been during the dangerous meeting with General Vaxor. This was different. This was about shaping the future of human involvement in galactic affairs. He thought carefully about his words before he spoke. Representatives of the galactic community, I welcome you aboard the UNSC Valiant. You have come here because you have heard about what happened in the Etherian system. You have heard that humanity defeated an expansionist power that threatened innocent lives. You are here because you believe that humanity might be willing to protect your own civilizations as well. A delegate from an insectoid species raised a limb in what seemed to be a gesture of acknowledgement. Captain Hayes, your species is young. Yet you possess a military capability that rivals civilizations hundreds of years older than you. This is impressive. But what we want to know is whether this military power will be used fairly. Will you protect all who seek your alliance, or only those who can offer something in return? Marcus took a moment to consider the question. It was a fair one. Throughout history, powerful nations often protected only those who served their interests, but humans had learned through hard experience that this approach led to conflict and suffering. The principle that guides humanity is simple, Marcus said firmly. We will stand against aggression wherever we find it. We will protect those who cannot protect themselves. We ask nothing in return except friendship and mutual respect. This is who we are as a species. This is what we value. Sarah Mitchell, standing beside Marcus, added her own perspective. On Earth, we have learned that diversity is a strength. We have humans from different backgrounds, different cultures, and different beliefs working together because we share common values. We believe that the galaxy can be the same. Species that would normally never meet can learn from each other and grow stronger together. Kevin Davis stepped forward and addressed the military capabilities question directly. Humanity comes from a death world, a planet where every environment is hostile. We have learned to fight in extreme conditions. We have learned to work as a team when our lives depend on it. We have learned to adapt to new situations quickly. These are not weaknesses. These are strengths that we bring to any alliance. The delegates listened carefully to these words. Some conferred with their own representatives through communication devices. Others seemed to be processing the information through their own unique methods of thought. The representative of the Etherians, a wise Etherian named Celis, stood and spoke. I can testify to the truth of what Captain Hayes has said. When my people faced annihilation, the humans came without hesitation. They asked for nothing. They gave their lives to save ours. This is not the action of a species that thinks only of profit or power. This is the action of beings who believe that all intelligent life has value. One by one, the representatives began to express interest in formal alliances with Earth. Some had specific security concerns. Others wanted access to human military knowledge to train their own forces. Still others simply wanted the psychological security of knowing that humanity stood with them against aggression. By the end of the summit, humanity had agreed to establish formal protective alliances with 27 different species. It was a historic moment, though no one in the chamber fully understood the magnitude of what was happening. Humanity was stepping into a new role in galactic affairs, not as a young exploratory species, but as a major military and political power. That evening, Admiral Grant met with Marcus in her command quarters. The two officers reviewed the agreements that had been signed. The strategic implications were enormous. Humanity now had commitments spanning 3 different galactic regions. If any of their new allies were attacked, human forces would be obligated to respond. This changes everything, Marcus said thoughtfully. Humanity is no longer a curious species exploring the galaxy. We are now a guardian species. The question is whether we are ready for this responsibility. Admiral Grant looked out at the stars through the window of her quarters. We have always been guardians, Captain. On Earth, we protect our young, our weak, our communities. We protect those who cannot protect themselves. It is natural for us. The only difference now is the scale. Instead of protecting a single country or continent, we will protect civilizations across the galaxy. It is what we were meant to do. Back on the Etherian homeworld, Elder Zinther stood in a restored temple and looked at the images being transmitted from the human fleet. He watched as the diplomatic summit took place. He saw Captain Hayes and Admiral Grant standing with representatives of species from across the galaxy. He felt a profound sense of peace. The Etherians had prayed for mercy from the galaxy. What they had received instead was something far more valuable. They had received protection from those strong enough to provide it, and moral enough to use that strength wisely. And now, it seemed, other species would receive the same gift. A week later, the human fleet prepared to depart the Etherian system. The reconstruction efforts would continue, but humanity's military presence was no longer desperately needed. The UNCS Valiant and the other ships powered up their engines. The Etherians gathered to watch them leave, and though they felt sadness at the departure, they felt gratitude and hope for the future. As the human fleet entered the wormhole that would carry them back toward human space, Admiral Grant sent one final message to the Etherian people. "This alliance is just the beginning," her voice transmitted across the system. "Humanity will not abandon you. Whenever you need us, we will be there. This is our promise, and we do not make promises lightly." In the darkness of space, the human fleet disappeared into the wormhole. News of what had happened in the Etherian system spread throughout the galaxy like wildfire. The young Deathworlders from Earth had arrived with overwhelming force and changed the balance of power in the galaxy. Some feared this development. Others welcomed it. But everyone understood that the future had changed. Humanity had discovered its purpose among the stars. They were no longer explorers seeking knowledge. They were protectors seeking justice, and the galaxy would never be quite the same again. From that day forward, when peaceful species faced oppression or invasion, they would think of Earth. They would hope that the Deathworlders would come, and many times they would be answered. 6 months had passed since the human fleet returned to Earth. The galaxy had changed in ways that no one could have predicted. The story of the Etherian rescue had spread to every corner of known space. Humanity had become something legendary. Young species spoke of the Deathworlders with awe. Older species that had once dismissed humans as insignificant now treated them with respect and caution. On Earth, everything was different as well. The government had established a new branch of military command, specifically for interstellar protection and peacekeeping. Admiral Jennifer Grant had been promoted to command this new force. Captain Marcus Hayes had been offered a position as head of diplomatic operations for Galactic Affairs. Both had accepted their new roles with the understanding that they carried the weight of human reputation across the stars. But not everyone was pleased with humanity's new direction. Some humans questioned whether Earth should be spending resources on protecting alien species. Others worried about the military commitments that had been made. There were debates in government chambers about whether humanity was spreading itself too thin, taking on responsibilities that could drain the planet's resources. Marcus sat in his office in the newly constructed Galactic Affairs building in Geneva. The office had a window that looked out over the city. He was reviewing reports from the various human outposts that had been established across the galaxy. The outposts served as bases for human military forces, and also as centers for cultural exchange and scientific cooperation. His communication officer entered with an urgent message. "Captain Hayes, we are receiving a distress call. It is from a species called the Zarthians. They are located in the outer spiral region, about 2 weeks of travel from the nearest human base. They claim that their world is under attack by raiders from a hostile faction called the Shadow Collective." Marcus pulled up the information on his display. The Zarthians were a relatively peaceful species, advanced in technology and science but lacking significant military capabilities. They had requested human protection when they heard about the Etherian situation, and Earth had agreed to defend them. This was the first real test of whether humanity would follow through on those commitments. "Contact Admiral Grant immediately," Marcus ordered. "Tell her that we need to deploy a response fleet to the Zarthian system, and notify the diplomatic corps that we may need to open negotiations with this Shadow Collective faction. Let us hope they are more reasonable than the Corthians were." Within hours, the decision had been made. A human fleet of 15 warships was dispatched to assist the Zarthians. The fleet was commanded by a younger officer named Captain Richard Torres, a man who had grown up hearing stories about the military achievements of previous generations. This would be his first real command in a combat situation, and he knew that his actions would be watched by the entire galaxy. As the fleet jumped into warp space, Marcus contacted Torres directly. "Captain, remember that you carry not just human hopes with you, but the hopes of every species that has placed their trust in us. Act with honor and courage. Torres acknowledged the message and committed himself to the mission. He understood the weight of what he was doing. The journey to the Zarthian system took 14 days. During that time, Torres received regular updates from the Zarthians. The situation was dire. The Shadow Collective raiders were unlike anything the Zarthians had dealt with before. These were mercenaries and criminals united by a desire for profit and power. They had no political agenda. They simply wanted to conquer the Zarthian world, strip it of valuable resources, and move on to the next target. When Torres's fleet arrived at the Zarthian system, they found the situation even worse than the reports had indicated. The Zarthian orbital stations were under heavy assault. The planet below was being bombarded by the Shadow Collective's warships. Entire cities were burning. The Zarthians had managed to hold their ground but could not push back their attackers. Torres immediately deployed his fleet into combat positions, but before opening fire, he attempted communication with the Shadow Collective commander, a gruff being named Kretch, who led the raider fleet. Torres transmitted a message on all channels, making it clear that the Zarthian people were now under human protection, and that any continued aggression would be met with military response. Kretch's reply was contemptuous. He laughed at the human captain and declared that his forces would destroy the human fleet and continue their conquest. Kretch seemed to believe that his years of raiding experience made him superior to a young human officer with a relatively small fleet. Torres made the decision to engage. The human warships moved into attack position with practiced efficiency. Unlike the Korthians, who had relied primarily on firepower, the Shadow Collective raiders used hit-and-run tactics and rapid maneuvering. They were faster and more aggressive in their tactics. The battle that followed was intense and brutal. The human fleet took damage. Several ships were hit hard by Shadow Collective weapons fire, but the humans responded with overwhelming coordination and tactical superiority. Torres deployed his forces with precision, using the Zarthian system's spatial features to advantage. He split his fleet to attack the raiders from multiple angles, preventing them from coordinating their attacks effectively. Within 40 minutes, the Shadow Collective was in retreat. Half of their fleet had been destroyed or disabled. Kretch, seeing that his forces were being annihilated, ordered a full withdrawal. The remaining raider ships turned and fled the system at maximum speed. Torres did not pursue them. Instead, he maintained position to ensure that they did not return, and then began coordinating rescue and relief efforts. The Zarthians, watching from their shelters, saw the same thing that the Etherians had seen 6 months earlier. They saw the Deathworlders arrive with overwhelming force, save them from destruction, and then show restraint and mercy. News of the human victory spread quickly. In boardrooms and government chambers across the galaxy, people began to understand that this was not a one-time event. Humanity was serious about its commitment to protecting the weak against aggression. The young species from Earth had established itself as a consistent force for good. However, the Shadow Collective retreat was not an end to the story. Intelligence reports suggested that Kretch was planning a revenge attack. He had pride, and that pride had been wounded. The human military command made a decision. They would not wait for another attack. Instead, they would pursue the Shadow Collective and remove this threat permanently. A special operations team led by Commander Lisa Brown, the same medical officer who had served on the Discovery, was assembled. The team infiltrated the Shadow Collective's main base through careful planning and strategic maneuvering. In a swift operation, they arrested Kretch and dismantled the command structure of the Raider organization. The operation sent a message throughout the galaxy. Those who preyed on the weak would not be tolerated. Humanity was not a species that could be bullied or intimidated. Humanity was not a species that would sit back passively after winning a battle. Humanity was a species that would pursue justice and remove threats to peace. Back on Earth, Marcus reviewed the reports of the Zarthian operation with satisfaction. Captain Torres had proven himself to be a capable and thoughtful commander. The operation had been conducted with minimal civilian casualties and maximum effectiveness. This was exactly the kind of action that the galactic community needed to see. Elder Zinther of the Etherian sent a message to Marcus expressing gratitude for humanity's continued commitment to peace and justice. The Etherian elder noted that other species were beginning to feel safer, knowing that the Deathworlders stood ready to defend them. The galaxy was entering a new era of stability. But Marcus knew that this stability was fragile. There were still aggressive species out there who did not respect human power. There were still warlords and tyrants who would try to extend their domains. The work of protection and justice would never be complete, but humanity had accepted this responsibility, and humanity would see it through. In military academies across Earth, young officers studied the battles in the Etherian system and the Zarthian system. They learned the tactics that had proven successful. They learned about human values and human principles. They understood that they were training not just to be warriors, but to be guardians of a galaxy that desperately needed protection. The legend of the Deathworlders continued to grow, and in every corner of known space there were beings who slept a little easier at night, knowing that humanity was watching over them, standing ready to answer the call whenever justice was needed.